Alrighty, so welcome back from spring break. And for me, for week 14, when I pulled up my code this morning, I decided it would be a great time to kind of update my code because after having not coded for a week, I noticed for me it takes a little while for my brain to kind of cycle up on coding. So, what I did for my output was I changed it to where by the way, I used the class. That was the requirement, big one from this week, right? So here's my class order, my class for the order. And I based it on gathering the items from my um, order form. And what I ended up doing is I wrote a function just to handle getting those items. And if you haven't used parse int, when you're selecting items, especially out of drop downs, even though you can specify type in there, it still comes in as a string, I've noticed. So I just did a parse int for both the item price and the quantity. And then I grabbed the index as well. Okay. And then I pushed my values into an array and then I returned that array here. So once I have that length of that order array, then I can do a little error checking. I can show the total and show the order. That's where I decided I wanted to do something new, right? This is actually code I had before. So what I ended up doing is I set up another class. And the second class I used was kind of in line with what I showed you in the week 14 attendance was, for your dev 2 example, was I set up another class called sales. And it's funny, after you set up something, you realize you could have done a much better job on naming. But I use the constructor for just setting up a blank, an empty array, not a blank, but an empty array. And then I have one method, which this method got a little more involved because what I ended up, and I'll just show you my form, what I ended up wanting to do was actually keep track of just the number of items I sold in addition to this number of sales. So if I had burger and I had 4 of those and I had a smoothie and I had 1 of those, right? I'd want to say not only was the sales total here, but then how many items were ordered. And what seemed like a fairly straightforward thing to do turned out to be a little more interesting. Just because I think the idea of ramping up again after we've been away from coding, I'm guessing many of you, like myself, didn't code last week. So what I ended up doing on this method was I set up some variables and I iterated over using the for each. I could have done the reduce, but as you've seen me to do before, I decided to leave the for each in there. And then I just totaled up the amount. Now this I'll show you in a minute where that comes from. And then the total number of items ordered is actually in this array. And I'll show you how I set that up. And then I just push that out to the screen. But what I ended up doing in my event listener was I created a object. Now this object is not like the objects we're creating from the classes. These are regular object literals. This is what we've been using this whole time. So they differ in that sense. Like these are the more straightforward, this is just an object that has a key and a value and a key and a value for my case. So the amount was coming off of the order, which I had set up here, my substantiated object, the amount, the total. And then the items, I ended up doing this as I actually recorded this video twice because the first time I realized my number of items wasn't lining up. So I ended up having to, when I submit each order, was actually determine the number of items in there. And I did it by iterating over this array to find the number of items ordered. And then I pulled it out because in this case, if you look at the way I set up the array, I put these 3 items in there for each one, line item 1, price, and quantity. So once I did that, then I can just push that into that new object that I got from calling the class on there. So that was kind of fun. It made me actually have to stop and rethink about stuff. And it's probably not the best way to handle it, but it's the way I handled it today. But again, give yourself a little bit of break or not. It's up to you. But I just know that this is the benefits of coding every week is that you just get in the mode of coding and you don't have to ramp up as much, but after a break you do. So I challenged myself just to write some new code. And when I did that, I realized that's why, you need to write code weekly because sometimes you forget. Anyway, I hope this helps you to see my output for this one. Have a good one.